Hey there, and welcome to the latest chapter of our sci-fi adventure. If you love epic space tales with romance, suspense, and a dash of humor, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our future stories. Let's jump right into it. The landscape of Solara III stretched out before Marcus, a world unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering metallic spires reached into the sky, their surfaces shimmering as they reflected the light of the distant twin stars. The air carried a faint scent of salt and ozone, as if the very atmosphere was alive with ancient energy. There were no familiar sights of Earth, no oceans, no green fields, only vast bioluminescent jungles that illuminated the horizon. Each plant seemed to pulse with a soft, ethereal glow, and strange creatures flitted through the air, their wings translucent and humming with an eerie vibration. Standing on the ramp of the shuttle, Marcus took it all in, his heart pounding. He could hardly believe he was about to make first contact with an alien species. This was his mission as humanity's ambassador, and everything depended on making a good impression. His breath quickened, a mixture of excitement and fear washing over him. He had always dreamed of exploring the stars, but now that he was here, the weight of the moment felt heavy on his shoulders. Marcus was just a man from Earth, handsome in a rugged way, with short brown hair and a sturdy build. But he wasn't the warrior figure the aliens might have expected. Still, he was determined to prove that humanity had much to offer. Despite the calm exterior, his nerves were palpable. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears, and the fear of the unknown clawed at him. The species he was about to meet were more advanced than humans could imagine, and their biology was a mystery to him. He took a step forward, and suddenly a strange hum filled the air. A low, resonating sound, like the pulsing of some massive engine. Then, out of the glowing jungle, a figure appeared, tall and regal. The creature's skin shimmered in shades of silver and violet, its eyes glowing with a fierce intelligence that seemed to pierce right through Marcus. The being moved with fluid grace, its form bending and shifting like liquid. "Is this real?" Marcus whispered, the words escaping his lips before he could stop them. The figure locked eyes with him, and for a brief moment everything seemed to freeze. The air grew thick with anticipation. Just as Marcus began to breathe again, a loud crack shattered the silence, coming from the trees behind them. The noise was sharp, sudden. Something or someone was approaching. His heart skipped a beat as he turned, searching for the source. As he looked around, a new figure emerged from the shadows, even larger and more imposing than the first. This alien's skin was dark, an electric blue that pulsed in time with its heartbeat. The creature carried an aura of authority that made Marcus stand a little straighter. Behind it were two others, both women, with glowing violet eyes that studied Marcus with curiosity. "Solara," the new alien spoke, its voice deep and resonant. "It seems our species have much to learn from the human." Marcus stood frozen, unsure how to respond as the tension in the air mounted. His first contact with the alien species had begun, only it was nothing like what he had imagined. As Solara, the leader of the group, stepped forward, she tilted her head, her glowing skin shifting in the dim light. "Human," she said, her voice oddly soothing yet strong, like a melody. "You come from Earth, yes? We have heard much of your kind." Her gaze flicked over him with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "But you are far simpler than we had imagined." Marcus swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. Hello?" he said, feeling awkward and more than a little ridiculous. Solara's lips curved into a slight smile, and she chuckled lightly, the sound warm but teasing. "Your greeting is quaint," she said, "but understandable." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary, as if assessing him carefully. We shall see if your species is as interesting as we have been told." Before Marcus could respond, a rustle in the undergrowth caught his attention. His heart rate picked up as he spun around, instinctively reaching for his communicator. What was that? The air felt thicker now, as if something was about to happen. The trees parted and the elder alien, the one with the electric blue skin, stepped forward, flanked by the two sisters. The elder's presence was commanding, almost intimidating, as if he were the true authority among them. "Thalora," the elder spoke, his voice low and measured. "It seems our species have much to learn from the human." Marcus's throat tightened. As he realized this was only the beginning, what had he gotten himself into? The elder's voice rumbled like distant thunder, deep and resonant, but his eyes gleamed with suspicion. "You are the human who wishes to mingle with our kind?" Marcus blinked, the weight of the question settling heavily on his shoulders. He was prepared for diplomacy, but the intensity of their scrutiny made him feel small. "Well, yeah, I'm here to represent Earth, to form an alliance, for mutual benefit," he stammered, trying to sound confident, but unsure of how much they understood of his intentions. Thalora, who had been standing silently, let out a soft laugh that echoed through the clearing. Her laugh was light and musical, a stark contrast to the elder's deep tone. "Indeed," she said, her voice playful, "but first let us learn if you are worthy, if your customs are compatible with ours." There was a brief pause as she stepped closer, her glowing skin shimmering in the dim light. "And perhaps we will discover what is so intriguing about your kind." The elder snorted, his eyes narrowing further as he continued to study Marcus. Like an unfamiliar animal. "You will soon understand," he muttered, his tone filled with a strange menace. "There are rules here, stranger, and your place is not as clear as you think." As the words settled in, Marcus shifted his stance, trying to maintain his composure. He wasn't sure if he had made a favorable impression, but he certainly didn't want to lose control now. Thalora, sensing his discomfort, shot him a quick, reassuring glance, but her expression quickly returned to one of playful curiosity. The group began to circle Marcus, their eyes scanning him with a mix of fascination and amusement. He felt like a specimen on display, under the intense scrutiny of beings far more advanced than him. He tried to stand tall, but there was something unnerving about their alien gazes, their sharp, glowing eyes that took in every detail. One of the sisters, a tall figure with skin that sparkled like molten silver, stepped forward. Her violet eyes gleamed with curiosity, but there was an unmistakable sense of amusement in her gaze. "What is this?" she asked, reaching out to touch Marcus's hair. "Your hair?" Marcus flinched as her fingers brushed against his short brown hair. It wasn't much, but he'd never been touched like this by anyone, especially not an alien. Yeah, I guess humans don't have the, shiny scales you all do," he managed to say, trying to diffuse the situation with a bit of humor. The sister smirked, her sharp features twisting into a grin. "Scales. Oh, how charming," she said, amused. "You do have some oddities about you." Without warning, she lifted a hand and gently tugged on Marcus's ear, causing him to jump. "Slightly. Hey, those are called earlobes," Marcus blurted out, taken aback by the unexpected touch. He tried to regain some composure, but his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The aliens around him burst into laughter, their voices blending together in a strange, melodic chorus that echoed across the alien landscape. Thalora, who had been silently observing, couldn't contain a smile. "Human humor," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "Fascinating. This will be an interesting journey." Marcus, though still a bit off balance from the teasing, couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth from their laughter. There was something oddly endearing about their reactions, even if it was at his expense. As the laughter subsided, the mood shifted slightly. Thalora's gaze lingered on Marcus, and for the first time he noticed something deeper in her eyes. Curiosity, amusement, but also a flicker of something more. Was it interest? Was it attraction? You see, Marcus of Earth, Thalora continued, her voice playful yet laced with a hint of challenge, we are not so easily impressed. She stepped closer, her soft glow brightening the area around them. But we will see what your people have to offer. You will need to prove yourself. Marcus stood still, unsure of what to say. But as she spoke, Thalora's lips curled into a smile, and with a mischievous glint in her eye, she winked at him. The gesture caught him off guard, leaving him unsure of whether she was being serious or playful, or maybe a mix of both. Before he could gather his thoughts, the elder spoke again. His voice, when it came, was low, dangerous even. But remember, human, he said, his eyes narrowing, not everyone is as forgiving as Thalora. You may find yourself in more trouble than you know. The words hung in the air like a warning, and Marcus felt his stomach twist with unease. The elder's tone carried a heaviness that spoke of power and dominance, and it was clear that Thalora's playful demeanor did not speak for the entire alien society. There were deeper currents of tension beneath the surface, and Marcus had yet to fully understand them. With the weight of those words still pressing down on him, Marcus tried to maintain his composure, though the stakes were rising higher than he had anticipated. He glanced over at Thalora, who still seemed unfazed by the elder's words, but her eyes held a challenge too. It was clear that the path ahead was not going to be easy, and the tension between the two species would only grow more complicated. From here, as the group of aliens continued to study him, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had thought he knew about diplomacy was about to be turned on its head. The strange planet, the glowing skies, the teasing and the warnings, they all felt like pieces of a much larger puzzle he had to solve. But the pieces weren't fitting together as he had expected, and just as the tension reached its peak, the elder turned and walked away, his large, imposing figure disappearing into the depths of the glowing jungle. The two sisters exchanged glances, their violet eyes still studying Marcus before they followed. Marcus was left alone with Thalora, whose soft glow illuminated his surroundings. He could feel her eyes on him, studying him with an intensity that left him breathless. "Don't worry, Marcus," she said softly, her voice carrying a reassuring tone. "Not all of us are so serious, but the rest of them will want answers. I suggest you be ready." As her words lingered in the air, Marcus couldn't help but wonder just what kind of answers he would need to give, and whether he was truly ready for the challenges ahead. As the days passed, Marcus found himself growing more accustomed to life on Solara III. What began as a tense and awkward first contact had slowly evolved into something more complex. His interactions with Thalora deepened, and each day brought him closer to understanding the intricacies of her world, and, unexpectedly, to her. Thalora, who had once seemed distant and even mocking, was now genuinely intrigued by Marcus. She would take him on walks through the alien world, showing him the wonders that made Solara III so unique. The crystal forests, where trees shimmered with an internal light, seemed to hum with energy, casting strange, shifting shadows on the ground. The lakes, as transparent as glass, appeared to float in the air, their surfaces reflecting the two moons that hovered above like silent guardians. And then there were the cities, structures made of translucent materials that seemed to bend light in impossible ways, creating cities that appeared to float in the atmosphere, held together by forces unknown. The beauty of it all was breathtaking, but Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation. The aliens were welcoming, but there was a distance he couldn't bridge, a divide he couldn't cross. Thalora, however, seemed to grow more curious. about him, her initial teasing transforming into genuine interest. They would sit together by the lakes, discussing everything from Earth's history to Solara III's cultural practices. She was fascinated by Marcus's idealistic views on Earth and humanity's potential, while he was equally captivated by her intelligence and the strange allure she exuded, something he couldn't quite put into words. Their conversations, which had started full of light-hearted jest, slowly grew more serious. Thalora, once the playful leader, revealed her people's values and customs, their philosophies on life, and their complex understanding of balance in the universe. She spoke of her species' deep connection to the planet, their unity and purpose, and the way they viewed relationships, not in terms of ownership, but as shared interests and mutual respect. One evening, as they walked through the glowing fields, their footsteps barely making a sound on the soft, moss-like ground, Thalora's voice broke the silence. "You see, Marcus," she began, her tone light, but with an edge of something more serious, "we do not marry as your kind does. We share interests in unique ways." Marcus glanced at her, intrigued but confused. "What do you mean?" Thalora's eyes gleamed as she continued, her lips curving into a playful smile. "Our culture requires us to share, to balance." She said it with such ease that it sounded like a natural law of the universe, as if it was self-explanatory. "Balance?" Marcus repeated, furrowing his brow. "What kind of balance?" Thalora paused, her gaze growing more intense as she met his eyes. "For example," she said slowly, her voice dropping to a more personal tone, "my sisters would find you interesting." She let the words hang in the air between them, and Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "They are curious beings, and like me, they would want to understand you." Her smile widened, but there was something more to it now. A challenge, a hint of mischief. Marcus blinked, trying to process the weight of her words. His mind raced. Was she suggesting what he thought she was? The idea of sharing wasn't something he was used to, especially not in the context of relationships. He had been trained to negotiate, to form alliances, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. He could feel the tension building between them, a strange energy he couldn't ignore. Before he could respond, a sudden buzz from his communicator broke the moment. The sharp, insistent sound jolted him out of his thoughts, and his hand instinctively reached for it. His heart dropped when he saw the message. It was from Earth. The brief text was chilling. "If Marcus does not return within the next 48 hours, Earth will begin considering other options with the Solar Alliance." Marcus's stomach twisted as the weight of the message settled over him. He had known this moment was coming, the urgency of his mission, the pressure from Earth's leaders, but seeing it in black and white made it all the more real. His mind raced with the implications. If he didn't act quickly, everything he had worked for, the potential alliance, the hope of peaceful coexistence, would be lost. And with it, his connection to Thalora, which, despite all the tension, was beginning to feel like something worth fighting for. Thalora's eyes narrowed as she noticed the message. She stepped closer, her expression hardening as she looked at the screen in his hand. "What is this?" she asked, her tone shifting. The playful glint in her eye was gone, replaced by something colder. "Just a message from my people," Marcus replied, his voice trailing off. He didn't know how to explain it, how to explain the weight of his mission or the pressure he was under. He felt a sudden responsibility, a crushing sense of duty to Earth, but also to Thalora and her people. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about real, personal connections. Thalora's gaze didn't soften. "Then your people do not understand our ways," she said coldly. The words stung, her voice laced with disappointment. Or was it something more? "If you cannot stay, then you are not ready for this alliance. Our culture does not work in such a short time. You must Prove your worth in ways beyond mere diplomacy. The coldness in her voice was a sharp contrast to the warmth she had shown him only moments before. It stung, and Marcus felt a surge of guilt rise in his chest. Could he really turn his back on everything they had shared, everything he had begun to feel for her, for the sake of his mission? Was it truly just a mission to him anymore? Thalora turned away, her back to him as she looked out across the glowing fields. You will have to choose, Marcus. Earth or us. You cannot have both. The silence between them stretched on, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Marcus stood there, torn between the duty to his people and the unexpected pull of his growing connection to Thalora and her world. The world he had come to admire, the world that now seemed like it was slipping through his fingers. As he stood frozen, his communicator buzzed again, this time more urgently. He knew what it was, Earth, waiting for his response. The pressure was mounting, but Marcus knew one thing for certain. Whatever decision he made, it would change everything. And for the first time since landing on Solara III, Marcus wasn't sure what he wanted anymore. With a heavy heart, Marcus turned back, toward Thalora, unsure of how to bridge the growing divide between them. Would he choose Earth's mission, or a future with her? As he opened his mouth to speak, the ground beneath them trembled slightly, the distant rumble of something far greater than a simple earthquake shaking the very core of Solara III. Something was coming, and Marcus wasn't sure if they had enough time to figure it all out before it arrived. The pressure was mounting. Marcus had barely a day left before Earth's leaders would begin reconsidering the Solar Alliance, and yet, every time he reached for his communicator, the message seemed more distant, less meaningful. As the reality of his mission pressed on, his thoughts kept drifting back to Thalora. He found himself growing attached, not just to her world, but to her. The alien society was already on edge, divided in its view of Marcus. Some saw him as a valuable asset, someone who could bridge the gap between their species and Earth, someone whose presence could bring about an unprecedented alliance that would forever change the course of history. Others, however, viewed him as a threat. The elder, with his deep mistrust, had warned Marcus early on that his place was not yet clear, and it seemed that with each passing moment, that warning became more true. Thalora's sisters, in particular, had begun to show more interest in Marcus, and it was not the friendly kind. Their behavior, subtle but unmistakable, had begun to make him feel like a prize being claimed rather than a representative of humanity. He had already felt like a specimen on display, but now it was different. Their eyes lingered a little too long when they looked at him, their smiles just a little too wide, their voices a little too warm. It was flattering in a way, but it made him feel increasingly trapped. His connection to Thalora was growing, but so were the complications. He had come here to build an alliance, to make history, but now, with the constant pull of the alien customs, he couldn't ignore the nagging thought that maybe he wasn't just caught between Earth and Solara III. Maybe he was caught in something deeper, a cultural web that was already pulling him in too far. One evening, as Marcus and Thalora walked along the edge of the crystal forest, the air heavy with the scent of glowing blossoms, the discussion turned from diplomatic strategy to something more personal. They had been walking in silence for a while when Marcus finally broke the quiet. "I don't know if I can do this, Thalora," he admitted, his voice heavy with a mix of frustration and confusion. "The pressure to return to Earth, the weight of my mission, and the way your sisters are looking at me. I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions, and neither one seems right." Thalora, usually so composed and confident, seemed to hesitate for a moment. Her gaze softened, but there was a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "I understand, Marcus, but you must understand too that our world is complicated. My sisters—" She paused, her voice soft but tinged with concern. "They are not as open as I am. They see things differently, and they view your presence here with a different purpose." Marcus frowned, puzzled. "What do you mean? I thought the idea was for us to work together, to form an alliance. Why would they be against it?" Thalora hesitated before continuing. "There are customs here, Marcus, customs that are forbidden in your world. But here, they are normal, even essential. We share everything, every experience, every bond. When someone of your kind enters our world, it is not just an alliance that we seek, it is integration." "Integration," Marcus echoed, his confusion deepening. Thalora's eyes met his, and there was a hint of both sadness and something more intense behind them. "Yes, Marcus. My sisters, like many in our society, believe that we should share all things, relationships, connections, even those that seem personal to your kind. They see you as a part of the balance we strive for, but they will not accept you unless you understand this sharing." Marcus felt his stomach twist. He knew what she was implying, but hearing it out loud made it feel like a trap. He could already sense the eyes of the sisters on him, their curiosity laced with something darker. He hadn't expected his mission to be this complicated, but it seemed that every moment spent on Solara III only deepened his entanglement in their culture, both politically and personally. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, his communicator buzzed sharply, cutting off the tension in the air. It was a message from Earth, an urgent one. The message was simple, but it carried a chilling weight. "Marcus, you have 24 hours left. If you do not return with a decision, Earth will begin considering other options with the Solar Alliance." Marcus's breath hitched as he read the message. The weight of his duty to Earth settled heavily on his shoulders, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the pull he felt toward Thalora, the undeniable connection he had begun to form with her. He had come here to represent humanity, to make history, but in the process, he had become entangled in something far more personal. Thalora noticed his reaction and stepped closer, her expression growing more serious. "What is it, Marcus?" she asked softly. He turned the communicator off, his hand trembling slightly as he put it back in his pocket. "My people are pushing for me to return," he admitted. "I don't know how to explain it to them. I don't even know what to tell them about this place, about you." Thalora's gaze darkened, a flicker of something almost dangerous flashing in her eyes. "Your people don't understand us. They don't understand how we live, how we share. They will never accept our ways, Marcus, not fully." Marcus swallowed, his thoughts swirling. He had never felt so torn in his life. Earth, his mission, his duty, it was all so clear. But Thalora and Solara III, the strange world he had come to admire, were making it impossible to ignore the deepening connection he felt. Later that evening, as Marcus sat alone trying to clear his head, Thalora's sisters approached him. They walked with the same grace as Thalora, their movements fluid and purposeful. The eldest sister, who had been particularly interested in Marcus since his arrival, stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made him uneasy. "You must understand, human," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "We will not allow Thalora to continue her relationship with you unless we too share a part of you. It is the way of our people. The balance must be maintained." Marcus's heart dropped, the words hitting him like a physical blow. He felt both desired and used, as though he were an object to be passed around, not a person with his own desires or agency. His mouth went dry and he struggled to respond, unsure of what to say. Thalora's sister continued, her eyes narrowing. "You may think you are here to form an alliance, but you are part of a much larger web, Marcus. You are no longer just a diplomat. You are part of this balance, whether you wish it or not." Marcus's mind raced. The weight of his feelings for Thalora, combined with the growing pressure from his mission, felt unbearable. This wasn't what he had signed up for. But now that he was here, entangled in their world and in Thalora's life, there seemed to be no way out. As Marcus stood frozen, trying to find the words to refuse, he realized something terrifying. The situation was spiraling out of his control. Thalora's sisters weren't just asking for his participation, they were demanding it, and the implications of their demands were impossible to ignore. Would Marcus comply, or would he risk everything for a chance at true freedom? The decision he made in the next few hours would change his life and his future with Thalora forever. The council hall was silent, the tension in the air palpable. Marcus stood at the center of the room, facing the alien leaders who had once welcomed him with open arms. Now, their eyes were cold, their expressions hardened as they deliberated his fate. A new faction had emerged within Solara III's society, one that viewed Marcus as a threat. His very presence was seen as a disruption to the delicate balance the aliens had worked to maintain for centuries. The council members, who had initially extended their hospitality, now turned their gaze on him with suspicion and disdain. The elder who had warned Marcus about the complexities of Solara III's culture stood at the forefront, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "This human," he began, "has already caused enough disturbance. His presence here has unsettled our people, and his actions, no matter how well-intentioned, threaten to tear apart the harmony we have worked so hard to achieve. He must leave." The weight of the elder's words struck Marcus like a physical blow. His heart raced as he glanced around the room at the alien leaders, their faces a mix of agreement and reluctant hesitation. His mission, his entire purpose for being here, was on the verge of falling apart. The stakes had never been higher. The council's decision was clear. Marcus was to be exiled from Solara III, his presence no longer welcome. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he realized that the path he had chosen, one of diplomacy and unity, was now under siege, both from within the council and from the hidden faction that opposed him. Thalora stood by Marcus's side, her expression a mix of sorrow and defiance. Her sisters, who had once shown him interest, now stood behind the council, their faces devoid of emotion. Marcus felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He had come here to forge a connection between two worlds, to bring humanity into the fold of the universe. Yet now he was being cast aside like an unwanted relic. The council's decision was final, but Marcus refused to accept it without a fight. This was not just about him anymore. It was about Thalora, about the bond they had formed, and about the future he wanted to build with her. He couldn't just walk away. With a deep breath, Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with determination. "You want me to leave?" he asked, his words cutting through the silence of the council hall. "You want me to abandon everything we've worked for? The alliance, the potential for peace. For what? Because you fear change? Because you fear a human's presence?" The council members shifted uneasily, but Marcus pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest. "I may not understand everything about your culture, but I know this. Peace doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding, from learning, from sharing. And that's what I've come here to do. I'm not your enemy. I'm here to help." Elder's gaze grew colder, his jaw tightening. "You speak of peace, human, but peace cannot come at the cost of our way of life. You are a distraction, and distractions must be eliminated." Thalora's voice, usually so composed, broke through the tension like a knife. "No, Marcus is not the problem. He's the solution. The council may not understand this now, but I do. I will not stand by and let him be cast aside. For the first time." Marcus saw Thalora's true resolve, her willingness to stand by him, even if it meant challenging her own people. It was a moment of vulnerability, of trust, and it solidified something in Marcus that he hadn't realized until now. He wasn't alone in this fight. Thalora was with him, and that meant more than any diplomatic mission ever could. With a fierce look in her eyes, Thalora turned to the council. "If you cast Marcus out, you cast me out as well," she declared. "I will not be complicit in your decisions. You have lost your way." The room fell into a tense silence. The council seemed to hesitate, their members exchanging glances, as if torn between their loyalty to their customs and their respect for Thalora's leadership. It was a delicate moment, one that could go either way. The clock was ticking, and Marcus knew that the longer he stood here, the more likely it was that his fate would be sealed. He turned to Thalora, his heart heavy with the weight of their shared decision. He had fought for this moment, for this bond between their worlds, but now it seemed as though all of that was slipping away. And then, just as the council seemed to come to a decision, something changed. A low hum began to reverberate through the ground, growing louder with each passing second. Marcus felt the vibrations beneath his feet, the air thickening with a strange energy. The council members shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting around the room in sudden fear. The door to the council hall burst open with a deafening crash, and a new group of figures entered, their presence overwhelming. The new arrivals were cloaked in dark armor, their faces hidden beneath metallic masks. The room fell into a stunned silence as the figures advanced, their footsteps heavy and deliberate. One of the figures, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His voice was commanding, cold, and filled with authority. "The council has failed you," he said, his eyes locking onto Marcus. "The human is not the threat here. We are." The revelation hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had thought the council's opposition was the greatest danger, but this was something entirely different. A hidden faction operating in the shadows had been watching him all along. Their agenda was unclear, but it was obvious that they had plans that didn't involve peace or diplomacy. The tension in the room skyrocketed as the armored figures advanced, their every move calculated and precise. Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing with the implications of what was happening. Thalora stepped closer to him, her protective instinct kicking in as she placed a hand on his arm. The leader of the new faction tilted his head, his gaze sweeping over the council members. "You have failed to protect your people, and now we will take matters into our own hands." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. Was he about to face the greatest threat yet? What did these new figures want, and how did they fit into the power struggle between Earth and Solara III? As the armored figures closed in, the chamber's doors slammed shut, trapping everyone inside. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the hum of the alien machinery that powered the building. It was clear now, Marcus wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was caught in the middle of a war between factions he had barely begun to understand. With the council divided and the new faction standing in opposition, Marcus had to make a choice, one that could determine the fate of not just Solara III, but his future with Thalora. Would he be able to navigate the chaos and survive, or would he be consumed by the very conflict he had come to resolve? The room was thick with tension, but Marcus wasn't backing down. With the weight of Earth's future on his shoulders and the fate of Solara III hanging in the balance, he knew he had to act fast. The armored faction, with their cold eyes and hidden motives, stood between him and the fragile peace he had worked so hard to build. As the leader of the faction stepped forward, Marcus's mind raced. He needed a solution, but he didn't have much time. The council was divided, and it was clear that the new faction wasn't here to negotiate. They were here to take control. But Marcus wasn't just a diplomat. He was a human, and that gave him an edge. In the heat of the moment, Marcus did something unexpected. He appealed to the one thing that could unite them all: shared goals. He turned to the council, then to the leader of the faction, and spoke with a confidence he didn't know he had. "I may not fully understand your customs, your culture, or the complexities of your society," Marcus began, his voice firm and clear. "But I do understand this. Both of our worlds want peace. We both want to avoid a future filled with conflict. I came here to build a bridge between our species, not to tear it down." The room fell silent as his words hung in the air. The council members exchanged wary glances, their uncertainty palpable. But Marcus wasn't done. He continued, his gaze steady as he looked each of them in the eye. "I'm not just an ambassador for Earth," he said, his voice softening but gaining strength with every word. "I'm here because I believe we can do better. We can create something lasting, something that benefits both our worlds. But to do that, we need to trust each other, we need to work together, and we need to set aside our fears." The leader of the faction remained unmoved, his mask of stoic indifference never cracking, but Marcus pressed on. "You may not trust me, and I may not trust you yet," Marcus added, his tone resolute, "but we can still choose to work together. That's the only way we'll survive the challenges ahead." It was a gamble, he knew that. But it was the only play he had left. For a long, agonizing moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the council members nodded, their expressions shifting from distrust to cautious acceptance. The elder who had once condemned him stepped forward, his gaze not as cold as it had been before. "We will allow you to stay, human," he said, his voice a mixture of resignation and reluctant respect. "But know this, your actions must reflect the values you speak of. The peace you seek is fragile, and you will be held accountable." Marcus nodded, relieved but still aware of the delicate balance he had to maintain. The leader of the faction, after a long pause, finally spoke. "We will allow this temporary alliance," he said, his tone less certain now, as if the fight had gone out of him. "But understand, human, this is not the end. The future remains uncertain." With the immediate threat quelled, the tension in the room lifted slightly. Marcus knew it wasn't over. But for the first time, he felt like there was a path forward, a path that didn't end in violence, but in mutual understanding. Later that evening, a ceremony was held to commemorate the newly forged alliance. The streets of Solara III's capital city were alive with activity, the atmosphere charged with a sense of optimism that had been absent before. The bioluminescent trees lining the streets flickered with vibrant colors as the people gathered in the city square. Marcus stood by Thalora's side, his heart light, despite the weight of the decision he had made. The ceremony was a symbol of everything they had achieved, the bridge they had built between their worlds. It wasn't perfect, and there were still many hurdles to overcome, but for the first time, Marcus believed in the future they were creating. Thalora leaned in, her voice soft in his ear. "You did it," she said, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I couldn't have done it without you," Marcus replied, his voice low. He met her gaze, and for a moment, the noise of the celebration around them faded. All that mattered was the quiet strength between them. As the ceremony continued, a peaceful hum filled the air, a sense of unity enveloping the crowd. Marcus couldn't help but feel a deep connection to this place and these people. He had come here as an outsider, a stranger, but now he was something more, a part of something bigger, a part of Solara III. As the night wore on, the celebration began to wind down. People gathered in small groups, exchanging stories and laughter, their faces glowing with hope. Marcus and Thalora found a quiet spot by the lake, the stars reflecting off the surface of the water, their light shimmering like the promise of a new beginning. Marcus stood with his hands in his pockets, looking out across the alien landscape. He had come a long way from Earth, and in many ways he felt like a different person, a better person. The journey wasn't over, but he was ready for whatever came next. "I never imagined I'd be here," Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. "I never imagined I'd be part of something like this." Solara stood beside him, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the smallest steps," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "And sometimes the greatest challenges lead to the most unexpected victories." Marcus turned to her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I'm glad I met you, Solara. I'm glad we're in this together." Her smile was soft, but there was a depth to it, a quiet understanding. "So am I, Marcus. So am I." As the ceremony came to a close and the crowd began to disperse, a sudden faint hum interrupted the peaceful atmosphere. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but Marcus felt it in the pit of his stomach, a warning, a call. He turned toward the sky, his eyes scanning the stars, when a flash of light appeared in the distance, pulsing from deep within the galaxy. It was faint but unmistakable, a signal someone or something was watching. The mysteries of the universe were far from over, and the journey ahead would be just as uncertain as it was thrilling. The final shot lingered on Marcus's face, his resolve firm, but the mystery of what lay ahead filled the air with tension. The story was far from finished, and a new chapter was about to begin.